Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our September 9th, 2025 regular meeting of the Board of Directors. Thank you to those attending in person, joining us over Zoom, or watching our recording at a later time. The public is reminded that if they wish to speak during community comment, they will need to fill out a speaker form located in the back of the boardroom on the table to my left. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. Forms should be turned in to our board secretary, Kim Coven, at the end of the board table on our left. Comments will take place during the designated community comment portion of our agenda. Before we dive into tonight's agenda, I want to take a moment to introduce at the table with me. To my right, we have Superintendent Degner, Directors Eystone and Eastham. I'm President Malone. To my left, we have Vice President Abraham and Directors Finch and Lingo and Board Secretary Kim Coven. And with that, we'll dive into the first item on the agenda, and that will be our student representative. And first up, sorry, I'm trying to get to that part of our agenda. I am having tech issues. Okay, we're gonna go with city, Alma and Tobiah. All right. Please join us at the podium. Welcome.
Good to be here. I'll go first. I'm Tobiah Collins. I am a co-president at City High along with Alma. I want to thank you all for the opportunity to come speak. It's a great, we do not take it lightly that we are invited to the place where the sausage is made, so thank you.
I'm Alma Bandari Narayanan. I'm the other co-president at City High, and we'll give you our update from City High now.
The first thing I'm going to report you all with fingers crossed and hopeful for the future is that there have been no major incidents or fights at City High thus far, which Principal Bacon told us with great excitement.
Yeah, it's been a pretty positive environment in the school so far. Everything's just starting up. City High was well represented at the Hillsbank Youth Salute event on Sunday night. Jesse Varner was one of the overall winners, and Amal El-Taib was one of their runners for that scholarship.
We also have record enrollment in marching band this year, and rehearsals are starting up for our fall play, which is going to be East of the Sun, West of the Moon. I will give you all details of the performance dates when those are available, if you want to come.
Our homecoming prep is also underway. We're planning for our homecoming parade to be Wednesday the 24th. That's always an exciting event for the east side of Iowa City. Our senior paint fight also went really well. It was a pretty inclusive environment. I personally have a vendetta against whoever nailed me in the face, but otherwise it was a really fun event. Yeah.
Sports. In terms of athletics, we don't have too much to report as the year, but two exciting things. One, the first ever state baseball championship, not just for Iowa City High School, but for Iowa City. That was this summer, so big hand to them. And our boys cross country team is currently second in the state.
That's all for now. Everything's just starting up, but we're excited that we got to give you an update.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up, we will have Liberty High and Mia. Oh, Mia and John.
All right. Hello. Liberty has gotten lots of stuff going already. Marching band has gotten into the swing of things, and a lot of stuff has just been going on. So I'd love to tell you about that. And yes.
Hi, my name's Mia Eastman. I'm a senior at Liberty High School. So do you want to get started with homecoming?
Yep. So this week is homecoming week. We have our homecoming parade tomorrow, so that features a lot of different parts of Liberty. So we have the marching band, tons of extracurriculars, and the athletics in that. On Friday, we will have our homecoming football game with the marching band doing the halftime show. And then on Saturday, we will have our homecoming dance, which will be very fun, I think. this week we're also doing Spirit Week, so we're trying to foster a community in Liberty by making sure that students have things that they can do during homecoming week. So that involves like dressing up and doing all these different things during the week.
And then just going back on like our recent past events, we did the Color Sunday, September 8th at 10 a.m. It was sponsored by the Big O Foundation. If you might know them, they promote awareness on mental health and suicide prevention. And then we also had the band mattress fundraiser. And then in terms of sports, we have a lot going on this week. So this Tuesday, we have a varsity girls tennis meet versus Prairie, a varsity volleyball match later tonight at 7 versus Kennedy, a varsity girls swim meet in Waterloo. This Wednesday, we have our Powder Puff flag football game from our senior girls and our junior girls. We do it every year. It's tradition, lots of fun. I actually won't, but I will be watching, and that starts at 7:30. And that's also on the stadium field where we have all of our football games. This Thursday, we have our varsity boys golf meet at Meadows Golf Club at 3:15, and then we also have our varsity girls tennis versus Cedar Rapids, Washington, out in Cedar Rapids, Washington High School at 4. And then this Friday, we have our homecoming assembly during our Liberty 30-minute period in the middle of the day, just to kind of get us amped up for the weekend. And then we have our varsity football game versus Linn-Mar at Liberty from 7. And then on Saturday, we have varsity volleyball tournament from 8:30 to 6, and our varsity boys and girls cross country meet at Luther College from 9:25 to 12.
Awesome. Yep.
And that's all.
Yep. Thank
All
you.
right.
Thank you.
Thank you. And next up, we'll have West High, Waleed, and Eddie.
Hi, my name is Waleed Ibrahim, and I'm with my good friend Eddie, and we're just going to talk about the overall goodness of how West High has been the past 2 weeks.
So to start us off, we're actually talking about athletics, specifically our football team. And we're very happy with the dedication and hard work they've put over the summer with practices, and we've definitely seen their hard work pay off. For example, we did see a win against City for the first time in a while, 30-0, and then following up Hempstead 56-0 as well. And, keeping the energy high. Yeah, 56-0, sorry. Oh, 56-7, sorry. But keeping the energy high, we plan to go to Pleasant Valley, kind of, keep the momentum going. Hopefully, we also do have a couple notable things that have happened within these first couple weeks of school in football, specifically the school record performance by Ethan, number 1 for Iowa City West. 2, this also follows with Ethan Headings being number 1 in touchdowns and receiving yards in 5A currently, and 2 juniors in the top 5 passing yards, which are our quarterbacks Mikey Moody and Reese Wheeler, and our running back being second in the 5A with rushing yards as well. To follow up, we also saw Adam Salem have 3 field goals, which tied first in top 3 in all
PATs.
All PATs.
In cross country on the boys' side, we've got a varsity team that's ranked. And at our first meet, we had Michael Hanna placing 5th place, who is a sophomore. Jake Weiler placing 10th, who was also a sophomore, and then a freshman placing 11th, Eli Dunham. On the girls' side, we are seeing the same energy. At their first meet, which they got first at, Kate Van Wanning got 2nd, and Adrian Hodge got 3rd, I believe, who's also just a freshman. And their team is ranked 14 in the state, and they're only going up from. It's pretty clear that our school is not just about competing, we're excelling. This is the kind of talent that works hard and makes us proud to represent our community. And not only that, our volleyball team is 10-1, including all tournaments, which includes a 3-0 lead against Dubuque Senior. They are ranked 5th in the state right now. Lila Eastfold is 2nd in 5A in terms of assists, and there's a sophomore, Izzy McDonald, also 5th for successful serves in the state class. Homecoming is coming up with a beautiful week behind it. We're actively choosing our Spirit Weeks. We're voting tomorrow morning, actually. And with our Trojan Games coming up at the same day as the Pep Assembly, we are excited.
And just to follow up, we have just decided our homecoming theme, collected among all of student government and taking a vote. It's going to be the Great Gatsby, also known as like the 1920s, kind of. So that should be really fun. We just wanted to touch upon the indoor facility getting built for the 3 schools within the Iowa City like community. We just want to say we're very grateful, and we've seen great appreciation displayed by the marching band, the football team, and other things of the sorts.
Administration.
Yeah, administration as well. So yeah, we're very grateful, and I'm pretty sure Liberty and City are happy about that as well, for sure. So
We had to include this. You know, we're very proud being the #1 ranked school in Iowa for the 4th time, I believe, consecutively. And with that pride comes gratitude. For example, Ms. Barnhouse is a great English teacher who allows students to come to her advisory if they need help from tutoring from other students, which not only helps our school academically, but it brings us together as a community through intelligence. West High, best high.
Thank you so much, and thank you all reps for being here. Tate did include their update, and it's attached to our agenda. They highlighted kicking off the week or school year with their PBSI orientation week and a field trip to School of the Wild that was organized by their science department. So they're hopeful they'll be able to have an in-person rep or another mechanism to share ongoing updates. So thank you all. Have a good night. Next up, we'll hear from the ICEA President, Brady Shutt, with his update.
Hi, I'm Brady Shutt, President of the Iowa City Education Association, President Malone, Directors, Superintendent Digner, and Secretary. I recently represented ICEA at an Iowa City Federation of Labor event, and where we get to talk about the work that we do together as a district. There were other local labor unions there sharing their experience. And I will say the strength of our collaborative process and our outcomes was fantastic, and it was clear that we do things differently. A nice example of that is on tonight's consent agenda, the complex case pay differential for our paraeducators is on there. We have that listing. That's thanks to our collaboration. I think that's a fantastic thing that we should all feel proud about. And while the strength of our partnership is, of course, strong and worthy of celebration in events like those, I think that the true strength and value and importance of our is when we face important challenges together as we work to fulfill our shared commitments of providing world-class educational opportunities for all of our students and workplaces where all of our employees feel valued, respected, and confident in their ability to serve. So ICEA remains dedicated to those shared commitments and values, and we remain collaborative partnership as we staff in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. And I do not have any community comment slips, so we will on to approval of tonight's agenda. Is there a motion?
I move approval of the agenda.
Second.
Thank you. Board Secretary Covin, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. Next up, before we get to tonight's consent agenda, did any directors who reviewed the bills this cycle have any questions or comments? All right. Are there any items that directors would like to pull from tonight's consent agenda?
I would like to pull number 3, specifically to talk about Exhibit A.
Okay. Any other items? Hearing none, is there a motion for tonight's consent agenda minus item 3, the personnel agenda?
I move approval of the consent agenda minus item 3.
Second.
Thank you. Board Secretary Covin, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. Director Lingo, you just didn't come through. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Great, thank you. Director Lingo?
this goes to Superintendent Degner and his team. Could you help explain how the complex case differential is, kind of metrics or anything that goes into that?
Yeah, I'm going to actually ask Mr. Proud to do that over there. So, Nick, you want to go ahead and respond to that, please?
Yep, absolutely. Hello?
You're there.
Okay. Yeah, just kind of working through this. Thank you for the opportunity to talk through the agreement here. It's all part of our negotiated agreement, and we established that, first of all, you'd have to work with a student who's identified as a complex kind of case or a situation related 50% of the day. So with 50%, at least 50% of your day, because a lot of times in these situations, a paraprofessional would work with the student over the course of the day. Some of the factors that we looked into, there's two really bigger categories. One is health related or medical needs, so things where you might have a medically fragile student, restroom needs, especially at the secondary level, and then some other just health items, maybe feeding tubes, etc. And then the other piece that we looked at is some of our students who have behavior intervention plans and the complexity of those. And that's another piece that we looked at. Is it a standard behavior intervention plan, or is it something that has greater need than your typical plan? This is something that we're continuing to work on as a team because we think it's just something that we knew going into this. I think we discussed early on that there's going to be some messiness as we try to work through it. So it's something we continue to work with our principals on as we determine students who may need the additional supports.
So if some schools have more than others, it's just a matter of the students in that building?
Yep, it's
Okay.
absolutely based off the student and their IEP.
Thank you.
Any additional questions or comments from board members? Okay, hearing none, is there a motion for the personnel agenda?
I move that we approve the personnel agenda.
Second.
All right, Board Secretary Coven, ready to vote.
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. Next up is our policy review, and it's the 100 series for district. I believe this is the third time we're seeing it, and I don't know one of the other policy and governance members would like to make any comments since the chair, Director Williams, is absent tonight.
Yeah, she's good like that.
Yeah.
We didn't obviously have a P&G meeting since the last one, but as I recall, it's just the 100s are up for their annual review, and I don't know that there's any applied to them, so it is kind of adopting them again as for the annual review.
Great. Any other comments from other directors? Okay. Hearing none, that takes us to the presentation portion of tonight's agenda. And first up, we have FY23 audit presentation. CFO Kurth, I don't know if you wanted to say anything as they or Superintendent Degner.
I will just introduce our auditors from RSM who are going to conduct this presentation. I appreciate them being.
All right, evening. You've got that going. Sorry, I'm the shorter one. Evening, I'm Kristen Hughes. We've put together a few slides that go through what I'll say are the usual talking points at the conclusion of the audit. Before we jump into the slides, just a summary on what you've been provided with as far as final. So the large document is the district's annual, also known as the ACAFR. So that's going to be the detailed financial statements. So within that, at a high level, like I said, we're going to go through a few highlights. That's a pretty large document to try and go through in a meeting, but definitely want to make you aware of what is included in that. So within the ACAFR, there are various parts of this. So the start that I would point you out to is we're going to touch upon the audit opinion. At the beginning in the intro section is also what's called discussion and analysis, MD&A. So I point folks there a lot as well. So if you don't necessarily have the time to dig into detail by detail pages, MD&A is usually a briefer 10 to 15 page highlighting any significant changes, variances, etc. So that can be a nice condensed read as far as the documents. As far as the basic financial balance sheet and income statement fund that is separately accounted for by the district, that has separate budgets, etc. There is a consolidated set of financials in front of those. Those are considered the district-wide, and that takes into account all of the funds combined. There are several pages of detailed footnotes. So again, GASB prescribes what you are required to discuss on areas such as the district's cash and investments, outstanding debt, other long-term liabilities, pension or OPEB or lease or long-term arrangement obligation you might have. It goes into detail about capital assets. And then at the back of the financial section, while it's unaudited, some users find that meaningful because most of that section is a 10 years, so you can sometimes see trend areas on topics such as revenue, outstanding debt, demographic, operational information about the district. And then at the very back of the document is the compliance section, which we're going to go through as well. So as a reminder, all organizations that expend more than $750,000 federal grant funds in a given year, which certainly the district does, requires the auditor to also perform what's called the single audit or the compliance audit in accordance with the Uniform Grant Guidance. So that's what's in the back of that. And then the separately issued document covers what's called. So that's just a quick high level of the actual documents. You have some key points from each of those in these slides. So I'll go ahead and let Aaron introduce himself, and he's going to go through the first.
Perfect. Thank you, Kristen, and thank you for having us. My name is Aaron Culp. Kristen, I serve as the manager on your financial. So with that said, I'll go ahead and pull up our slides for you and sharing some key information from the financial statements. I'm going to start out by talking about some of the key financial information specifically. I'll be comparing back to fiscal year 2022, and we'll call out some of the key trends we identified just for your benefit. I'll then turn it over to Kristen, and she'll summarize some of the results found in terms of both compliance, federal compliance, and state compliance that she made reference to, and then also some of the communications that we want to and that we are. So with that said, I'll go ahead and start out with revenue for the district. Now, we're going to be comparing, as I say, 2022 columns on the left over to 2023, which are the blue columns on your right. Revenue for the district overall increased from 2022 to 2023 by about $15.7 million. That's actually about a 6% increase year over year. When we look at the causes of that, what driving that, we really tied that to primary areas that were out of expectations or increases year over year. One of those is revenues from state sources, which is going to be the fourth set of bars on this chart here. When we looked at state sources of revenue, those increased by about $8 million. And we saw really a general increase in revenues from state sources, especially in the realm of state foundation aid, types of aid that are allocated for specific purposes from the state. We also saw an increase of about $3 million sources and interest. And really within that realm, that's the third set of bars on the chart up on your screens. That was really driven primarily by the interest side of the equation there. 2023 was a year with rising interest rates, the district a higher balance of cash and investments on hand. So those two things benefit the district and led to a sizable increase in. As you can see on the chart, we also saw increases in your other categories, things like taxes, revenues from federal sources, but those were relatively in sort of the almost to be expected range of 3 or 4. So with that said, I'll now move on to talking a little bit about the other side of the equation. Again, on your screens, we now have 2022 on the left and then 2023 on the right, which with each of these bar graphs representing a specific category of revenues. Total expenditures did increase by about $63 year over year, so that's actually about a 24% increase. Now, I will say that that is the headline, but there's a little bit of extra add to that, as that doesn't necessarily tell the there were really two categories that increased most strongly. You can see those are the last two bars on each of these tables. The first, it's that pale green second to last bar. That is your capital outlay, and that increased by about $24 million, nearly 25. Capital outlay this past 2023 fiscal year, that really increased strongly as the district really moved into implementing the Facilities Master Plan 2.0. So there was a lot of work done on the middle schools, on Horn Elementary, and then even the purchase of the building we're standing in right now was purchased during the year. The second category that really did increase a lot, that's going to be that last bar, that yellow color. That is debt service, and that increased by about $33 million year over year. Now, that additional context I made reference to, $30 million of that $33 million had to do with the district funding one of its prior bonds. So the district issued a new revenue bond during the year and then used those proceeds to refund a prior bond. That differential in interest rate expense on the district side, and then also would save some cash flow in future years. So that was a deliberate choice by the district, optional, and again, obviously has a net positive impact at the end of the day. The only other thing I'll throw out is, in addition to funding, the district issued $107 million worth. That does include that $30 million number I mentioned before, and so that as well helps fund operations. I'll then talk a little bit about the general fund balance. So this is really just status of the general fund, their net of assets less liability as of year end for the last 2 years under audit. Overall, the net impact, the net fund balance, that really did not change by too much. It's only about a 1% increase, pretty consistent for the general fund. Which, as you know, is the district's primary operating fund. The only noticeable increase or change I'll point out is really that red category of fund balance. Now, that is any fund balance of the general fund that's specifically legally allocated, legally restricted for a specific purpose. And so you can sort of see a detail of what that is allocated out for on the right side of your screen. And then we've talked about the governmental funds, we've talked about the general fund. There's really just one last fund to talk about, and that's the nutrition fund. You can see here, and again, in this case, 2022 is on your left, 2023 is on your right. What you'll see is that there was a sizable increase in operating revenues, which is that yellow bar, and then a sizable decrease in non-operating revenues. These actually relate to the same underlying cause, and so I'll talk about them together. But if you were to add them together, compare them year over year, there's really a very minimal change for the total of revenues, both operating and non-operating, only about 4%. The driver of this is really that back in 2020, still some pandemic era federal programs in place that helped subsidize the cost of lunch or meals in general, helped make them free for a wider population. In 2023, those programs were really sunsetting. So as more students and skills and as less federal aid was coming in, we saw essentially a related increase in both those operating revenues and decrease in non-operating. That being said, overall, the nutrition fund had a positive net change in net position, and so totally to be expected there. So with that said, I'll pause and turn over to Kristen to talk a little bit more.
Thank you. Excuse me. So the next couple slides, this is summarizing information that is ACFR that I mentioned. So as a reminder, as part of a financial statement audit, auditor gives an opinion on financial statements, does not give an opinion on internal controls. So that's not the purpose of the audit, but the standards do require if we become aware of items in the course of our test efficiency, that those are to be communicated back to those charged with governance, more specifically. So there are 3 levels of deficiencies. As I mentioned, you've got the material weakness. An audit may also identify control deficiency level, and just for your purposes, those are not required necessarily to be in writing. Those may be things that audit, they may be discussed. That's what the standards allow. But these 2 categories are the ones that you'll see summarized. So running through these, the first item you'll see noted, and there was a material weakness noted in inadequate controls over so in the write-up, and again, there's very specific requirements on the exact bullet points that the finding touches upon. But in there, you'll see more detail on really what this is just stemming from is the untimely financial reporting that occurred with these fiscal year 23 financials. So it's summarizing the timeline around these financial revisions that occurred with the supporting schedules we were provided during the audit, and then also just revisions and adjustments that came up in the actual financial statement over the course of the testing. So that's really what I'd say probably the 3 primary items that this. The next item was a significant. So you'll see a little detail in the audit adjustment. This just stemmed from in the course of testing bank some items had been identified as like miscellaneous reconciling between cash and the GL. So what I will note is in the corrections management post, cash in the bank, these were how transactions had been reflected in the general ledger. So I'll clarify that. I mean, that's usually pretty key to adjustments again in cash sitting and physically in the bank. It was how it was reconciled in the financials. But, cash reconciliations themselves are really, so we're definitely going to take a look at that, going to report that as a deficiency when problems come up in that area. Just critical control over a lot of areas of financial. The third significant deficiency related to inadequate segregation. But this is specifically incompatible, what we'll call incompatible responsibilities that were identified, things that should be segregated if and when at all possible when it comes to financial. Organizations may run into challenges, whether it is due to staffing, things like that, but we're still always going to certainly take a look at, and at the end of the day, keeping it, again, segregating and keeping duty separated whenever and all possible when it comes to the transactions around financial reporting. The state compliance reporting, so the Iowa State Auditor has external auditor review. Those topics are always in the report or any came up. So we've just noted the pages in the ACFR that you'll find that. The only item reported was variances in the certified enrollment. I think this comes up each year. I'll just say I don't know that this is overly uncommon. I think the key is as long as the district is working with the state to make those adjustments, but you will see that in that section of the ACFR. Moving into the single audit. So for perspective, the district federal grant expenditures that's summarized in what's called the CFA in the report. There is guidance on how the auditor selects major programs or basically grants at each year. So we picked 2 major programs following that guidance. You can see it was just for perspective, these 2 grants represented about 82% of the total CFA. Perspective on how much was subject to testing. So similar as the financial statement audit, we do not audit 100% actions in these grants. They're also subject to a sample basis, but those were the 2 to our testing. Both of these programs received an unmodified or a clean opinion. No instances of unallowable costs or anything material enough. There were 3 findings identified as it related to the first item. There were errors identified in that CFA that I mentioned earlier. And really, this was primarily cutoffs. So when preparing the CFA, you are intended to present it when it was expended in the financials. Just a handful of instances noted where perhaps something expended in 2022 was on the 2023 CFA. So we just noted and summarized. The next item was a material weakness as it related to the ESF grant. So this was really, as it notes, a lack of similar, when you think about this is just relating to the federal granting agency has reports that the district practice would be, an individual is preparing that information, someone else is putting a second set of eyes or a secondary review to help ensure that the information is as complete and accurate as possible. And there wasn't a secondary review noted there, so we noted that as a deficiency. That just opens up to submitted to the state or the federal agency. The third item, you'll see here, this just stems to the late filing of the single audit package. So the detail is in the federal government does have a requirement that the single audit is submitted 9 months after the fiscal year end, and if filing. So you'll see the finding just summarizes those requirements and that timeline was not met this year. So the auditor communications, the financial statements we did issue modified or clean opinion. So that meaning the financials were presented in accordance with GAAP. Based on the test form, there's reasonable assurance not identify any material compared to the requirements of GAAP. In the letter to those charged with governance, a couple things we'll usually highlight. That could be something new or different. The district was required to implement a new standard, GASB 96. It relates to subscription-based agreements. So the concept is going through and thinking, same thing was done with lease last year. This is more specific. So it just requires entities to now go through and think about what kind of long-term arrangements are you products. Do they meet the criteria to be recorded as both a liability for the terms of that arrangement as well as ability to use those? Significant estimates you'll also see talked about. So just a reminder. So examples include, estimating the depreciable capital assets, estimating obligation, participation in IPERS. So those are just instances in the financials that maybe aren't as straightforward as cash in, cash out, purchase receipt. We take a look at those as part of the audit, and we're really looking at a couple main things of if the district has a policy on these topics, or they're following their policy, but also we're taking a look and making sure the estimates seem reasonably supported by documents that are provided, that they seem consistent with peers in the industry and things like that. So each of the estimates we looked at were deemed reasonable. Audit adjustments, this will represent areas where when adjustments came up, identified by the audit team. So you'll see the detail of those. These first 2 bullet points, they're what we call cutoff issues. Again, management out for an accrual, recording things when the invoice or the cost or the revenue was actually incurred. So that that requires involving receivables and payables at year end. And so some of those were not initially identified. And the third one is what kind of came up in the cash reconciliation of funds, due tos, and due froms. Uncorrected misstatements, those are similar to what I just went through. So they're usually much lower dollar amounts. They're considered immaterial by management, and we agree that's reasonable. And so these are the ones not actually recorded in the, and instead you'll see them summarized in that letter to the board. Difficulties encountered in performing the audit. So there are a couple topics those charged with governance are aware of. So, with this year, just a summary of there were delays encountered in performing this year's audit, and we've covered our, responsibilities of making sure, obviously, you all were aware of that. And then one last topic, shared responsibility. Obviously, independence is our profession. So our firms have a lot of steps that we take before we commence with each audit, for example. But the reference there to shared responsibilities, it's just that's really a two-way, that things that could trigger reoccurring on the client's side that we need to be aware of. So just want to certainly just kind of make reference to that. That's an ongoing really evaluation. Trigger it at the start of each audit. If things are occurring throughout the year that could impact, if you acquire a new component unit, things like that, to just ensure that's getting mentioned to the auditor to avoid any independence issues. All right, I know that was somewhat high level. Happy to go through any questions, though, if anything in the financials, audit, anything for the district's team as well.
Thank you. Board members, if you have questions, feel free.
Okay, thank you, President Malone. I discovered over the weekend that the audit posted to our board docs did not include the 30 pages, which included the compliance section, the single audit, the corrective action plan, and the details of the deficiencies, and also including the section of the audit that was addressed to the board. Were you aware that that was not shared with the board?
I was not, since we don't handle the district.
Okay.
As a clarity, though, I'll just say 2 versions of the financial. One includes all of those. That's what gets uploaded to the Federal Audit Clearing website, where you're required to submit those. And then one does not include the compliance. For example, when the financials are included in like a bond document, that information is not required. So I can just speak to on behalf of the auditor. That's why I'll just say 2 versions of that are issued. But no, we don't control the process of what was distributed in advance of the meeting.
And what version is typically shared with a school board?
It would be the one that includes the compliance section, since we just went through
Okay.
those items.
Okay. All right. I'm still trying to sort out who made the decision to remove that part of, or to give us that form, that version rather than the other, and why.
That was an oversight on my part. Coming from not-for-profit sector, the version we always made available was the version of the audit, so there was no malicious intent with following old habits. So once we were aware that the practice in public education was to release the audit, we corrected the issue.
Okay. I'm also wondering, is there any processes we need to put in place to make sure that we don't have that mistake? Yeah.
Create an SOP
Okay.
internally for publication of the audits.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you, Alan. I do have a couple of questions about the corrective action plan.
Okay,
That's
I mean,
okay?
that's fine. And yeah, I
Okay.
was gonna say that will probably be them as manager.
Okay, all right. Do you want me to wait if, does anybody have, okay. All right, so, for finding, 001, for finding one, basically, we are, we're blaming blaming the deficiency on the turnover and the previous accounting team. So, turnover is a fact of life, and succession planning and transition planning is a fundamental role of our management. So number one, I'm kind of wondering why this was an issue to begin with, and then also wondering if we are putting anything into place to plan for succession and transition for all of our critical roles of our district, so we don't find ourselves in this situation again.
Yes, and I'm not sure that these mics are working, so apologies for that. Yes, so one of the challenges that we faced, and it's actually noted in some of the other deficiencies identified here, is that we really didn't have capacity developed within the business office staff to handle transition, particularly away from an individual who oversaw this process for 2 decades. And we lacked capacity within our office. We also lacked procedural integrity that would ensure that we were checking all of these boxes and we were able to generate timely and accurate reporting. And so that's something that's, honestly been a focus of mine for the last 2 years. And particularly since bringing Alan Moran on board 12 months ago, that's something that, I think not only with the 2 of us, but across the staff throughout our department, we've worked to better segregate roles, better identify procedures, ensure that our books are accurate and current, and that makes it much more possible for us to accurate reporting from those materials as we move forward. So, it's a process. Honestly, though, the biggest issue that we faced beginning was capacity within the department and lack of procedures that that were in place.
And so really that was my question for the next 2, 3, and 4 ones as well. If we have a documented process or procedure in place, back to this again, if we have updated tools or even just a checklist.
We have any in particular updated tools or anything like that at this point. It's largely been procedural changes. So, for example, review of every single item that gets posted is something that's now fully implemented within our office. So anything that's being posted is generated by somebody, reviewed by somebody else before it gets. The other thing that we have implemented is better segregation of control. So, for example, and it's something that, we've shared with the audit team, the previous reality was that, multiple individuals in the office had the ability to impact, a wide range of data. I, for example, right now have no ability to post an entry to a platform, and so that, better segregates those responsibilities, which addresses another one of the deficiencies articulated here. So, those are things that, we absolutely take seriously, not only because they bring us in compliance with accounting standards, but also because it makes it easier for us to do our jobs properly. So it's been a focus for us. It does take some time to implement and also to clean up some things as we've found.
Okay, and then just one more question on finding 5. With the target of getting back to schedule by March of 2027, would it be possible to provide quarterly updates and progress for future audits, perhaps along with our quarterly financial reports?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Additional questions from board members?
What would, this goes probably to CFO Kurth, sorry, Superintendent Degner. What would you say you've learned the most out of this? It's been a while since it was supposed to.
Yeah, I think that I kind of hit on some of those things before in terms of, some of the deficiencies that we had in place, whether that was in terms of procedures that we were following, how we were documenting what we were doing, along with just making sure that our staff training was adequate. We had staff capacity and we had some redundancy in our staff capacity for transition to back to work. I think the biggest takeaways from my perspective really come down to the importance of having all of these activities scheduled as time as possible, so that when we get to the situation where we're at the end of the year, whether it's preparing for an audit, whether it's filing state reports, whatever the case, we're not doing as much cleanup as I think historically has been done in the district. We're getting things entered properly, we're getting them documented properly, and we're reviewing accuracy.
So just to piggyback off of that, given the findings from this audit, I'm assuming your team was able to go in and look at fiscal year 23-24 through the lenses of these findings to make sure that we don't have the same issues in that year. Does that make sense?
Speak to this, sir.
Yeah, so, yes, and one thing I can attest to is my approach to financial statement preparation is predecessors. Fundamentally, the focus on the balance sheet, just this concept of your balance sheet, right? P&L, I'm sorry, I still have a little term that I can't get rid of, is going to be right as well, but the concept of making sure our entire balance sheet is reconciled will go a long way to addressing a number of the concerns that were raised during the, at least my opinion. The auditors can feel free to disagree with me on that, but making sure those schedules are completed, reviewed, and make a huge difference in.
Any other questions or comments from board members? Thank you so much. Oh, go ahead.
Excuse me, President Ramon. Just crosses my mind to ask, you think we have the necessary staffing level now to meet our audit requirements?
I'll answer for them. I think this is an area we need to continue to staff. And one thing, just to end on a positive, you know, for these guys, Adam and Alan, if we think the teacher shortage in Iowa is bad, the school finance shortage. There's just not trained, qualified people that are serving, becoming more and more apparent about that need. And so this is something we've actually, you know, we've talked about, or we talk about on a recurring basis, just staffing levels in the business. And like they'd addressed tonight through the findings of this about segregation of duties here in Iowa City, and the opportunity to continue to build that out, that the more we're able to build out, the more we're able to cross-train and then also build capacity in that office. And so I think in answer to your question, Director Eastham, you know, very thankful for these two, but help them accomplish those goals and that work, and to keep them out of also some of that day-to-day so that they can be continuing to monitor the district's large financial picture.
Thank you, Superintendent Degner. I'm not surprised at your answer. And finally, Adam, do you know about how many transactions the district has per month that have to be part of our financial?
So we transact roughly 1,200 invoices per month, and 3,500 individuals per payroll is the high level answer. I guess if you want to be more specific.
No, that's all right. That's fine.
Perspective, Charlie, when I try to export our transactions for a year to an Excel file, it maxes out the number of rows you can have in an Excel file.
Right. I suspected that would be your answer. Thank you.
Any additional questions or comments? All right. Thank you so
Thank you
much
all.
for being
Appreciate
here.
it.
That takes us to our quarterly financial report.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. One note for anyone sitting over at the tables is that I did get confirmation that the mics are feeding to the recording, just not really doing much here in the room. Okay, so I want to apologize actually for, I somehow didn't notice it until formatting issue on I think the 4th page document, and it's kind of shrunken, so I apologize for that. I am going to present the 4th quarter financial report tonight. I will happily answer any questions that you have. A couple of reminders before I get into this in much detail. Typically, and it's not just my practice going back a number of years, we don't financial report. One of the it's presented prior to submission of state reporting, which is due on Monday of next week. And so we're in the midst of, as Alan can attest, a tremendous amount of going through and addressing state reporting errors and things which are normal. All districts have them. And all of those have will have some impact on changing the numbers that I'm presenting here, but this is a snapshot of where we're at. This first page just goes through each of the funds. Again, a couple of things to note. One, some of these numbers will change. We will have higher budgeted receipts. We'll have higher budgeted disbursements for general fund, and some of the others will change as well. They should be in the ballpark, though, of where we will end up for these. So if you kind of glance down through, you'll see that most of them are pretty close to 100%, both in terms of revenues and disbursements. So there are a couple that jump out, but if you kind of look into the details on those, like for example, Fund 30 capital projects, that's 621%, but that's really spending out the remaining balance, and it's a very small amount. So that's just offsetting what may have otherwise SAVE or PEPL. We do have a couple other items. One, the PEPL amount is a little bit higher than usual. That had more to do with front-loading projects a little bit than it had to do with PEPL expenditures really being higher than what we would have anticipated. Just didn't quite get into the budget amount in time for earlier year financial reports. These pages are always super small. Again, I'm not going to go into a ton of detail. This shows prior year versus current year revenues. The chart down at the bottom, you can see we followed a very similar pattern. We have higher revenues this year. A similar pattern to last year, though, in terms of when those revenues come in. As school districts, we do see an imbalance in when our revenues arrive throughout the year. So this is the time of year that we're operating any meaningful revenues from July through now. And then our state disbursements begin to come in September. We actually probably will. And then our property tax disbursements, we generally get a smaller one in September, but then the bulk of that revenue source throughout the entire year is that property tax payment that occurs in October. Again, no real shocks in these terms. I'm going to zoom in here because, again, I apologize. I was doing some scratch work and I somehow that properly when I generated this PDF. So apologies for that. And I'll get a cleaned up version to Kim so that we but either way, expenditure levels. Again, if you look at the chart, you see that we are higher than last year. We were budgeted. And we followed a very similar trajectory throughout the year. We did end up a little bit higher than what was budgeted. There are a couple of caveats for that. So 1.1 million roughly dollars of those expenditures, for example, was tied to camera purchases for a grant program that's reimbursed by the federal government. And typically we would pay for capital funds. Because it's a grant, we have to pay out of general fund. That's something that I just didn't have budgeted for in our budget amount. So we did see some of that. We also saw some higher expenditures, in part due to higher staffing levels, in part due to other factors, including how we're accounting for distribution of what's called the teacher salary supplement that led to higher expenditures specifically for special education. One thing that you will recall is that those don't actually have an impact on our. So we will recover those dollars through the School Budget Review Committee's modified supplemental amount process. So even though we saw some higher expenditures there, they're not necessarily going to result in a lower unspent balance. And with that, oh, sorry, I do have one more. This is bank balances, cash and investments. I won't go into a ton of detail here because there isn't a whole lot of really interesting detail to call out. Just kind of goes into detail across our different funds, what those cash and investment amounts are, and nothing here that's really. This final sheet is the one that you probably turn to most, quickest when you first get this report. And you will see that I do have a lower projection here for that's largely driven by the model that I'm using, the expenditure amount being higher than what was originally budgeted. I do think that some of that is going to be offset by special ed deficit and reclaiming that authority, also EL deficit and reclaiming that authority. And it's one of the reasons that I say that typically I don't spend a lot of time on the forecast, because we will certify our enrollment on October 1st. Then we'll get data from the state to really see what that's going to be right around middle. That's about the time that we also find out what our special and also what our EL excess cost claim is going to be for next year. So that plugs in a couple of critical factors, both for the year that did, but also our projections going forward in terms of the enrollment side, which is the biggest. So those are going to be really critical pieces of data, and typically I come to you with a much more detailed unspent balance projection once we're able to go to the Iowa School Finance budget projections workshop. That is typically before our second meeting in October. So that's what I would target as being the one that we'll be able to present. It may be the first meeting in November, depending upon when we scheduled for that workshop. So either way, you do see that unspent balance projection is lower. I think that I'm being conservative, but I did want to reflect those higher expenditure levels and present the model's output with fidelity. A couple of things to note. This model still does assume a slight enrollment decline each of the coming years, so that's the same as it's been for quite some time. Our enrollment is tough to say where we're going to end up. We've been trending for the last month and a half above where we were previous years, and we hope that that'll continue. But there's always just a little bit of uncertainty until you get to October 1st and you can actually count kids. So there are a lot of variables, there are a lot of moving pieces. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Directors, feel free.
Just ask generally, I guess, of Matt, is what's being presented give any indication of our ability to bring on additional teaching staff at some point, maybe earlier in the year, to address some of the needs that have been voiced about class sizes? And I know that's a hard question, Matt, so.
Yeah, I think we'd always love to add more teachers, right? I think that's just the common refrain we'd want you to hear from us. But when you look at those unspent balance percentages, not just the number Adam puts there with the unspent authorized budget, we really need to try to be at that 5%, and that's something we've talked about as almost a minimum, knowing that, we're still running a pretty thin margin in that sense that, you're close to 2%. At the end of next year, if you'd hold your expenses, you'd be closer to 4, 3.5, but you really need to try to get to that 5% to feel healthy. The other thing, just like Adam's talking about with revenues from the feds being lower, certainty with those Fed revenues and what that's going to mean, and displaced staff or what that could be. And so I think the message is still to kind of keep our belt tight and add where we can and add smartly when we can. I do think we're optimistic, like Adam said, about some enrollment, but this is also the nervous time because we're hitting the 10th day and this is when kids start getting dropped from our rolls. And so we're going to see a little in that enrollment piece, but any positive change with enrollment would affect that financial picture as we look at next year, Director Eastham. So I don't think I would recommend at this time we add any additional staffing allocations this year, but I think it's a close monitoring situation for us to consider those staffing levels next year.
One thing I did want to jump in with, sorry, the question reminded me, I didn't speak to federal funds. That's another area where our revenues were title funding declines the year we just concluded compared to the previous year, which we didn't really expect with enrollment growth and with other factors. So I reached out to the state and learned that they actually for smaller districts use one approach to calculating that amount. For larger districts they use a different approach which uses a lagging piece of data related to free reduced lunch. And so we actually took a hit due to FRL declines during COVID when it was less critical for people to apply. I expect that those allocations will increase again and be more aligned with what our baseline had been for the current year. But because of the President's initial hold on federal funds, including title for schools, we still do not have an allocation amount for the current year that is well underway. So that's something that we are waiting on. And like I said, I am optimistic. I have not modeled it, but I'm optimistic that we'll see those programs, at least for the current year, increase. But until we actually get those allocations, I don't know for sure.
And out of the staff are already doing.
Yes, we're already delivering the programs. Yep. And that's where we were last year too, where we were already delivering the programs by the time that we got that creates some imbalance there as well.
CFO Kurth, I guess, that's what I call you. I'm trying to remember, what is the recommended unspent budget?
So the board's policy is 5 to 10%. That's our target. We would maintain 5 to 10%. Statewide, you see a lot of districts that target 10 to 15 or even 10 to 20. here in Iowa City, in part due to our size and in part due to our philosophy about educating kids we have here right now. We've set that lower target. So that's really the baseline that we're shooting for.
And looking through the previous years when we didn't go, I mean, when we were really close to the edge, what ended up happening is that we dipped below and had to make drastic cuts, correct?
Correct, yep.
So that's the,
Yeah, you want to have that cushion so that if something unexpected happens, we have, minimum a year to be able to respond to it without anything drastic.
because I'm just thinking that right now there's the $400 million short state's budget, and they're already having the projections come in sounding worse for the month of August in their tax receipts than even what they projected.
And the other thing I noticed on your spreadsheet here is that when we're finally getting to around 5%, around FY 2028, then it starts to go back down, right?
Yeah, and one of the things that's critical to note is that that's based upon, again, those enrollment declines year over year. If we see flat enrollment, and obviously this could be reality exactly as presented here.
Who knows what will happen, right? Yeah.
If we see even flat enrollment, this picture changes pretty.
So CFO Kurth, what happens, I know we certify our enrollment on October 1st. And after that date, if we see hypothetically an influx of 50 students, how will that impact?
It won't.
Okay.
And honestly, it's one of the curses of being a destination district. Every year, we finish the year with between 1 and than we had on count date. So that's a reality for us, is that every year we're educating 100 to 200 kids who we're not getting any funding for.
What if we get them on count date, Adam?
If we get them on count date, then we're fine.
Okay.
Yes, sorry. Oh, if we get them on count date, then what happens is we get funded for the following year. So our funding for fiscal year 27 is based upon the count that we record this October.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
Director Malone, I have a follow-up.
Go ahead.
So when we see influxes like that, and if I'm creeping out of the scope of this discussion, let me know. When we see large increases, say in a classroom or within a building, when we're sitting at 30, 32 students, and then you add on 4 more students in that school, and now we're at 34, 35 students in a class. When to add an FTE, or do you decide to add an FTE? How do you come to those decisions?
Well, first we ask Adam. No, I'm just teasing. But no, when we have those situations present, I do think we have a responsibility in those situations to try to address the class size. We might have done our best job to staff that at the start of the year, but if we get a school that tips over those aspirational goals, I will say it's somewhat case by case. If it's one student over, I treat that situation over that aspirational goal. Part of that goes into we have classes and sections that the parents, families, and teacher would be upset if we split that section into 2 just from the relationship. That's a lot more likely, like I said, if it's a 1 student over scenario than it is, again, if we get to a 3. We get some kind of a significant movement like that, we will look at the resources we have to try to make sure that we get an appropriate class size into that scenario. A couple of those years where we were either tight on the budget or that we were try to address some of those situations, that's never popular with that are losing the teacher that's displaced, whether it's even a section that's been split 2 weeks into the school year. It's not popular to the staff member at all that has to uproot and then go to a new school. So we've really tried to minimize displacements of staff after the start of the year. I think we have a responsibility to look at what solutions we have in play when that would happen, Director Lingo.
Another thing that is worth noting is that the majority of the students that we get as mid-year ads, which is a little bit easier of a situation to staff due to how those scheduled sections are comprised.
I would just comment also that to my understanding, the staff actually developed a potential method for determining class size across the elementary school, which was the 16-section model. Is that about right? And so it seems to me that, you know, there is an option available to us for evening out class size across enrollment variation. But that's not a very popular option for us. So we're stuck with the state's underfunding and doing which I frankly think is a excellent job on the part of the staff at working on class sizes under the restrictions that were affected. I sometimes wish we could be a little bit more flexibility in the community for understanding how districts are actually constrained and what we can do in terms of attaining class sizes in elementary schools that people want.
It's a tough situation. It comes up every
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, CFO Kurth.
Thank you.
That takes us to our next presentation, Artificial Intelligence Update. And who do we have the pleasure? Superintendent Degner?
Yeah, welcome Andrew Fenstemaker back. Andrew's been in front of you a couple different times. Joining us again this evening. This was an information item that the board had requested, I think maybe Director Lingo, as a follow-up. And so we wanted to update you a little bit about our progress in this area and where we've committed some resources.
Perfect. So thanks for letting me come share a little bit again. So one of the big things, just provide a little bit of a journey where we've been, where we're going. Provide you a little bit of an update on the teachers' current reality of things, where we're at right now for teachers, where we're kind of headed in the future. Same thing with students, where are students currently at, what's their current reality, and what are the next steps, where we kind of go on with things. So really kind of just give you a map of kind of the journey that we've been on. This goes back a couple years, so 23. I added some bullet points here to kind of simplify it down. So in the start of the 23-24 year, what we really did, getting some feedback from different stakeholders. That feedback helped guide us in terms of not only updating board policy, but also starting the initial conversation around responsible use guidelines for both teachers and students. So in that school year, we also did update board policy. There was two kind of big updates to the one of those was making sure that we did evaluate AI tools and resources. So that was where that software evaluation version play on that bullet point there. In addition, we also updated board policy to where students received appropriate training for basically safety when using generative AI tools and resources. So that was kind of the milestones for the 23-24 school year. We moved into last school year. We really started to flesh out more. What do we mean by responsible use for? So we had those drafts initially crafted last school year. In addition to that, we created student curriculum. So that was in response to the board update to the board policy to provide age-appropriate training for students. So we did have some curriculum. That initial iteration of the curriculum was for 2 lessons. We had 3-5 lessons. Those were all done in library. And then we also created 6 through 8 and then 9 through 12 grade level band lessons. And that was done during advisory homeroom time last school year. We realized there were some improvements that we could make to that software evaluation process to create a more seamless transition and basically automation process to get that more timely in the response to approving or denying requests. So in addition to that, not only was it for board policy around the AI side of things, but also for HRS. So as we move to high reliability schools, year 3 or basically level 3, where we're guaranteed and viable curriculum, that was another layer that was incorporated into that software evaluation process. Fast forward to this school year, we've deployed those guidelines. So the responsible use guidelines for students as well as for teachers have been deployed. The student curriculum, we knew that when we developed that initial AI curriculum for students that we were gonna have to iterate on it. The reality is that next year we're gonna have to iterate again and iterate again. It's gonna be an evolving kind of fluid situation. So this school year we have revised the K-5 lessons to where now they're standalone lessons for kindergarten, standalone lessons for first grade. We've tried to be intentional where you look through that scope and sequence and they build year after year on that content. For the 6 through 8, we've kind of morphed that, and 9 through 12, we've morphed that into where it's facilitated in social studies. So not in homeroom and advisory, we've moved that to social studies, which I'll speak to a little bit more. But that's kind of the high level view of what the past couple of years have been like. As far as teachers' current reality, this is just not necessarily unique data to our district, but just a poll of teachers. There's roughly about 2,000 teachers from the Gallup institution that went through. So really the reality is that 6 in 10 teachers are using some kind of an AI tool in their work. And so what that report also teased out was some of the themes that emerged. So teachers reported saving time, whether it's crafting activities, quizzes and assessments, some administrative tasks, if that's even just thinking about like, how do I analyze some of the data that you see here that's listed on the far right there about the patterns in data. Preparing to teach, the modifying materials really, when I think about that, really just how do we address the learner variability that's in the classrooms that we serve, and then generating feedback, modifying the material, supplementing instruction, and then also patterns and data that are. Those are kind of the 8 big themes that teachers reported using AI for and being able to save time when they use generative. With that, in the reality within our district, last year was the first year that I started cohort. So really trying to find a group of teachers, our early adopters, of how can we equip and empower them with kind of these 3 overarching goals of help them understand how generative AI works, how might they use it, and then lastly, how do we become critical consumers of it? We really underpinned that with the use of that AI literacy framework that you see there. That's something that was done in conjunction with Digital Promise. That was their AI literacy framework. I did have the opportunity to work with them in the development of that framework along with some other districts, so we were able as an organization to kind of support and drive that work. The other thing that I'll piggyback on here is that understand, use, evaluate is also kind of built the elementary and secondary curriculum, where we really want to ensure, so we have AI basics, which we would kind of equate to understanding. We have the AI potential, which would fit into the AI using, kind of that using category there. And then we have AI pitfalls. And so that would fit into evaluating. So we do have like a 3-part series for our curriculum that we've implemented. The student reality, this was survey data from last year. So last year in grades 6 through 12, the lessons that we deployed specifically in 9 through 12, we had 9 through 12 respond to some surveys, and then that data in the surveys was used lessons to have it be a more organic experience for them. So as you can see, about half of the students reported using generative AI to help them on schoolwork. When we asked them what are they using it for, you can see they're really kind of clarifying, planning, or revising were the 3 overall categories that they identified as the ways that they used the generative AI to help them with their schoolwork. So that was kind of the data that's unique to our. The other piece that I already briefly mentioned on it, so I won't spend a lot of time on this, is we have deployed curriculum. We've actually had, just for frame of reference, we've had a lot of external districts lean into our curriculum as a frame of reference for developing their own, because we've been one that's been out in front of developing the curriculum and actually deploying it and iterating on it. So we've actually been able to support a lot of other districts as well. So as I noted, we're still doing K-5 in library. 6 through 12 is transitioning to social studies. The social studies, just full transparency, we have a lesson, our single lesson that's going to be deployed with social studies by the end of September is what we're working on, and then we'll actually reconvene with, start building out more and more. So we have what we did last year. We realized that we want to iterate on those, more of a standalone grade specific experience for those students as opposed to the grade level bands. With that, just to give you a sample of what those lessons look like. So when we think about elementary, so K-5, here we start out, this would be like the AI basics, AI understanding. And so we talk about, we actually have kindergartners. This is an example of last year's kindergartners. Now we've first grade. And so what they actually do is they go through and they draw a picture of an apple, they draw a picture of a banana, and we actually use their images that they just hand draw. We use Teachable Machine, which is a Google product that basically takes and lets you train a data model, a machine learning model on those pieces of evidence or data that you have, and then you can hold up a drawing and it'll predict what confidence it has, whether it's an apple or banana. So we're just showing students that we have to use data to inform a data model or a large language model, essentially to be able to then trying to establish a foundation, understanding. In addition, we do start to introduce our elementary students to what are our responsible use guidelines. So that's a sample. Like this piece here is intentionally with that red box on the right to show them that the human must be in the loop and that the majority of our learning, our demonstration of understanding is generated by the human, and that we might use for this level, you can see here, the assisting level, that would be where it helps them assist to do a task, but again, their content is the majority of that work. The one piece I'll note here is that our teacher guidelines, one of the requirements is that teachers explicitly say when, if, when, and to what extent they can use generative AI. And as you see here, one of the first options is no use. We want teachers to have the professional autonomy within the space to dictate what is a feasible amount of use within their classroom space. The other piece is we try to equip those students with the knowledge and skills to evaluate. So we use this acronym, Evaluate with Care. So we want them to understand that they have to be critical consumers of that information. So that's the acronym we're using at elementary. I didn't put one in for secondary. We actually use basically does it pass the CRAP test. So they already use that in secondary to analyze information. So we just adapted that to fit within this student curriculum for secondary. This is just another example of what for elementary, an example to show students just drawing a landscape. And then this is an example of using Canva, which is a tool that is free for education that's been deployed across the district. We have not turned on the AI side of things for anyone not able to use it. And so with that being said, what we actually are working with the teacher to demonstrate to students is I could take a drawing and then I can actually have AI create augmentations to it and replace. Here is an example of the tree being replaced, the sun being replaced, and the car. And what we're trying to instill in those students is that we all have our unique creative identity. And if we offload that to generative AI, it's basically robbing us of our own authentic identity. So we're trying to showcase them how if we offload a lot of the effort work to generative AI, it's actually stealing our unique identity kind of learning journey. So with that, when I transition to secondary, just to give you kind of perspective, with secondary, the first lesson is trying to underpin everything with what it takes to learn. So there has to be friction in the learning process and that you have to have some of that productive struggle. So this is a short video that they end up displaying for the students, and then they actually dive into conversations to help. What happens if we actually offload the tasks to machines? Like if we offload the learning, at what point do we stop learning and transition to AI doing the learning for us? With that, that leads into conversations around the student responsible use guidelines and gives them an opportunity to dive into what that looks like within their content area. As far as next steps go, one of the big things here is just to explore how might AI assist us with just kind of administrative tasks, the operational efficiency. This is one of the things that we have spent money on as a district. This was kind of, I believe, approved last springtime where we purchased 200 licenses of ChatGPT EDU. Those are more from the operations standpoint. They are not necessarily something that we're being deployed teachers to use with students. The ChatGPT EDU licenses does not permit students to be able to use our licenses that we have. With that being said, I have had an AI task force kind of in the past. I do intend to ramp that back up again this year and build out what I would call just like an AI committee, because there's continuing to be enhancements and changes to guidelines from different state level organizations as well as national organizations that are providing some guidance. So making sure that we're meeting the mark on where we're trying to go. The other piece is I had already mentioned the AI champions. I'll continue that this year with a new set. This will be another place that we have spent money last year and we'll spend money this year. Last year, the price was about $1,000 less than that. So it was about $4,100 that we paid for 40 licenses for my AI champion teachers that were in that AI champion cohort. This year, it's $5,100. Those are for the licenses for the AI champion teachers that'll work with me. And in addition, there's $1,000 out of that. So basically 1,000 plus the 4,100 gets us to the 5,100 now. But that $1,000 is covering a partnership with School AI, which is mentioned on here, to help at an add-on that they are looking at building into Canvas as a support for students to help manage the tasks that are in there. So that will be something that we'll explore with them. The other piece is an AI summit. That's something that we have in partnership with Digital Promise. We'll be working with them to facilitate an AI summit here. That's actually part of a grant that we have with Digital Promise. We're hosting a convening here while we have some of those other 10 districts that are part of this grant that we have. We're going to facilitate an AI summit where we'll actually have kind of simultaneous where some students and we'll have some teachers not only from our district, but we're going to open it up to some surrounding districts to invite them in to take part in that experience too. And we'll have the opportunity at the end for those students to showcase some of their prototypes and designs to solve the problem of practice with generative AI. Then the next two pieces, just conduct a need analysis for us of what are the gaps and opportunities that we have to equip our staff with AI literacy skills as well as. And then lastly, just let's develop an AI strategic plan. So looking at how can we build out a draft of a strategic plan to help provide a framework for us as we look into the remainder of this year, but also into the future. So with that, that's kind of an update of the whirlwind of where we've been, where we're going, and all the fun that we're gonna have.
Okay. All right, directors, I'll open it up for questions.
It's an excellent presentation.
Did you have a question, Director Eastham?
No.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. Sorry, and maybe Brady might be able to help with this too. But how do we balance, or how do teachers balance it in the classroom, the use of AI? You know, I was listening to a podcast. It was, I forget which one, about just like Romeo and Juliet, right? And they were joking about how back in our day we used Cliff Notes, but they're just as difficult to read as Romeo and Juliet is. And then they talked about with AI, people just upload whatever the document is, whatever the book is, and the notes are readily there. But the way that students miss out on the nuance and the subtlety of the actual text of literature or whatever the textbook may be, and how does that balance look in the classroom, or is it a problem, or is it, so just kind of open the floor.
Yeah, I'll respond to it first, and then Brady wants to chime in. I think the reality is it's going to be a challenge. We're not unique in Iowa City that we're the only district that's facing this challenge. I think this goes back to the point on here about AI. I think we're in the right direction in terms of building student capacity to understand, as you saw with that lesson for social studies, trying to reinforce the transition from offloading the learning process to AI is robbing us of that academic task. On the same side of things too, we have to think now about the process over the project, where a lot of times we're looking at mechanism. Now there's going to be the process that's more influential in determining the student proficiency that we're giving them. I think also with those guidelines that you saw, we have teachers that have the professional obligation and autonomy to make a decision of, for this academic task, you're not permitted to use any generative AI use. Now, obviously, outside of school, we don't really have control what they're doing outside of school, but I think what you're going to see is teachers are leaning heavily in the conversations that can exist within the classroom space that tease out more of that critical in that learning journey to fully understand students' progression with those concepts. But I'll let Brady, I don't know if you have other thoughts on that too.
No, thanks. I think that last part for teachers is really critical, is to use, students are going to use it, teachers are going to use it, probably everyone's room's using it already, obviously, in some capacity. But I think being really explicit with students about what is acceptable for a particular project or assignment, what is out of bounds, and then moving to the next step of engaging them in that conversation. I think a lot of success when they've said, this is our project, we need as a learning community to develop what we think are the appropriate uses of AI, and we're going to hold each other accountable to that. And that in and of itself, in terms of the process, not just the product, has a lot of potential to really have higher level thinking involved with it. So I think it's just going to be shifting and adapting and using the tool. I really think that the tool that we have with the use guidelines for students is fantastic. It's been vetted out. Students have had, Andrew came into my classroom and got lots of feedback from students. He's done that across the district. So I think it's just helping teachers learn how to use that tool to engage students in a learning process about the use of AI and the pitfalls and the ethics, and there's a lot of different directions. But I think it's probably just going to take some time too, where we say that's an important part of learning. Let's take time to do it, and then see how it goes and reflect.
I was having a conversation with a special ed, and they were explaining to me how they were using AI to modify their. They indicated that they thought that they might be kind of in the minority of teachers that are doing that. So I have you here. Thought I would ask, do you know, are a lot of our special ed teachers? And if not, are we developing some type of training or mentorship to help them to be able to do that?
Yeah, I'll speak to that, and I'll let others chime in too. I think it goes back to the AI literacy piece assessment and identifying those gaps and opportunities. I think that was one of the things that resonated within that AI champion cohort is and as I mentioned, one of the big focuses of that cohort was to look at how we can address the learner variability in the classroom. And so within that was some of the feedback that we had from our ELL teachers that were in that cohort that I had, and highlighting some of the use cases. And from that, part of that goal from that cohort was also to start to develop a kind of a repository of use cases. Because to your point, I think part of the challenge is there's still some teachers that are a little bit nervous of it. It's just that kind of the fear factor a little bit. And so if they cases that are not out on the web or social media, when it's more organic and root district staff sharing those, there's more traction. So I think that's part of the goal of that literacy needs assessment, is identifying those gaps and opportunities. And then again, leading into that AI champion cohort, they've been kind of the pioneers on things, and then scaling out those use case examples to be able to share out. And I think that's another piece that we're looking at with those ChatGPT Edu licenses, is how can we work with a small subset of teachers to explore ways that they might be able to use it. I'll use one example. So with the Department of Justice has some new ruling around accessibility. So our Canvas course content by April of next year have some implications of ensuring that our content is accessible. We have ChatGPT Edu. You can create custom chatbots. So I took one, I trained it basically on the requirements for the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1, which we have to be in compliance with. And so I've shared it with some of my AI champions from last year to try it out. And they said that it actually helped coach them through how to adjust their content on their Canvas course to ensure compliance. So one of the teachers said that I just took a screenshot of my page, and this teacher teaches computer science, so she understands the embed code, but it gave her the code that she could just copy and paste in her Canvas course to make sure that the was accessible. So instead of having to go read through all of the accessibility guidelines to ensure actually mean as it relates to Canvas, I think that's where we can explore how do we operationalize some of these efficiencies to support the administrative tasks, but then get to your point of how do we actually utilize it to with some of those skills to better meet the needs of all learners that are in the district.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions, comments? So, quick question about the AI champions. I'm assuming it's from teachers across the district, K through 12, multiple buildings. And then are they feeling confident enough to then maybe bring a colleague along to say, hey, look what you can do and with AI? How is that working out?
Yeah. Great question. So basically it was opened up. I sent out an email to all staff last secondary is what I had spots for. We got right at, actually it was 21 secondary and 20 elementary. I was actually over my 40 that I had, but it worked fine. What we noticed through that, and that was part of the goal of our deliverables, was the integration of AI responsibly within the educational setting. And so hearing some of their success stories of how they partnered with their peers to support them of just some of the baby steps, but then also because they went through this kind of cohort to kind of build their capacity of some of the look-fors of, hey, this is something that we need to avoid doing, or hey, the output, if I use the output of generative AI at face value, it's not that great. You have to really massage and tweak and finesse it to actually get an output that's relevant to your student and to help you actually make some informed decisions. So I think to that point, yeah, I think there was some value in hearing those being able, and some of the, I know building administrators even gave time for those teachers to share some of the things that they were doing, ahas that they had with staff. So again, that was the goal of that, is how can we kind of almost train the trainer or start small and empower them to be kind of the champions of the change.
Thank you. And not to have CFO Kurth give me a look, but if there were stipends available, would that maybe help cover some of that dedicated time that AI champions would spend, and then bringing other building colleagues along? Just a thought.
I'll speak to that just briefly. So not that, I mean, I'd love if you want to throw more, but we, through that Digital Promise Grant, we had through there time after contract, because those teachers that were part of the AI Champion met after contract. I'm able to do that again this year. And then that grant that I currently have expires this next spring. However, we just got word that we have had a new grant awarded for, I actually wrote down because in case it came up, it is Pathways to Progressions. It's going to be empowering districts to equip K-12 computational thinkers with data and machine learning foundations. So that'll give us like another 3 years of working with Digital Promise at computational thinking work done, and now scaling it out to data science and machine learning. So that'll be another opportunity to keep kind of looking at how can we scale and root the learning in actual, like the computer science side of things and the machine, give a good foundation for those teachers so they truly understand how it works, so that they're not so kind of fearful of the change that's happening.
Great. Thank you. Any additional questions or comments? Thank you for your time tonight. I appreciate it. That takes us to our action item for tonight, and the action item for tonight is the approval or a motion to approve the 100 series for the school district. Is there a motion?
Move to approve the 100 series as presented.
Second.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? Hearing none, Board Secretary Coven, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. How would you like to vote, Director Malone?
What?
How would you like to vote?
Oh, I
Yours
didn't
isn't
get
coming
it.
through.
Yay.
Thank you. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. And that takes us to our upcoming events and agenda setting. First up, Director Liaison reports. Are there any items that directors would like to highlight or share if you're like me and did not add them this go around?
I'll share yours because you were there with me for the United Way Back to School event where they served, I think, 2,000 students, backpacks and school supplies, haircuts, dental checks, and was there something else? I think there might have, I don't know, there might have been immunizations too. I don't remember, but anyway, it was a wonderful event. We have a number of community partners who come together. I think this was the second year that they all came together to heartwarming, and I was glad to take part of it.
Yeah, it was a very well-organized event, and to see all of the kiddos' faces as they left, excited and ready for the school year. So that was a pretty good one. Thanks, Director Finch.
I just wanted to share that I went to the Longfellow birthday picnic today. A lot of games for the kids. Always kind of fun to see, across the district, the way the elementary buildings are able to have their own little events for the kids to enjoy, and the parents come if they can, and grandparents as well. So it was a great start to the year and some fun events. Thank you.
And I was able to join one of our campuses in welcoming back their students, City High, on that first day of school, and I was so excited, one, to see the number of students that were arriving like 30 minutes ahead of the bail schedule, and just the excitement throughout the auditorium to kick off the school year. So that was a really great way to start the year. Anything else? All right. Then that takes us to agenda setting, where we will have our first education of the school year. And I can't scroll down to see the topic. I'm sorry. Preschool, there we go. Thank you. And we will be at Penn Elementary, and we will start at 4:30. Looking forward to that. And then we will have our policy and governance meeting on the 20th. That will start at 5 o'clock. And they will review again the 200 policies as part of the annual review, and the 200.3R1 responsibilities of the Board of Directors. So that will be back on their agenda for review. And then our regular meeting will be at 6 o'clock, and Superintendent Degner, I know you had a number of items.
Yeah, I'm going to start with one. We'd like to have an agenda item on our continuum of services for serving our students and supporting our staff. You've probably seen my messages over the last couple days speaking to our dual commitment for obviously, when we read about things like we did in the media over the week, it creates concern, and I think it resonates for people. As I referenced in my message, this isn't an issue that's new to for the last couple years. There's some things and measures and processes we've put in place, I guess to say, that we'd like to share with you and try to get your feedback on. You might remember we had a topic with the board in the spring, somewhat connected to this same topic. We think some data systems and processes being also an important part of that to try to share with you for what can be some ongoing review cycles. But I think most importantly tonight, just wanted to share our educators are deeply committed to their kids and their students, and they deserve to feel safe and confident in their workplace. And I think this is a complex problem, and it's not just an Iowa City Community School District problem, but it's one that doesn't necessarily include an easy answer. And so if there was an easy solution, we would of course be employing it, taking advantage of that. But it does create an opportunity for us to have a conversation and continue to look at our system and continue to work with our people and hear feedback and look for ways to improve. And so we would like to have that continuum of services agenda item on the 23rd and start some follow-up conversations there. You're also going to have your Teach and Learning report, or the annual progress report as we more commonly refer to it. You might have noticed in your board update that I shared, we kind of have an academic sequence. I'm at a regular meeting to come back and share some of our progress in the area of Teach and Learning and that work. We're also going to come back and have a follow-up conversation about FMP 2.3 plans for high school campuses. You guys are familiar with us conducting that meeting at West High in particular there, but it seemed to make sense to kind of bring back all three of those different projects and give a high-level overview, knowing what else do I got for you here? Just a note that we'll have you set the date for a public hearing tonight on the accelerator, and there be bid approval, or request for bid approval that night on the 23rd. So those are the ones I have on my radar right now, and then of course we'll add in, figure out where to put something if you suggest it here.
But I also see we have a discussion item for high reliability school as an update.
Yeah, we'll probably keep that. We'll figure out how to put that together with the annual progress report. We kind of talked about, obviously that's the work that informs, some of those outcomes you see in the annual progress report. There's another, I think it was Director Finch that had requested even some data around HRS or HRS level 2. We see that as a October Ed committee, but there's some entry level conversation we would do with HRS too with that APR.
And do we know what the education showcase will be that meeting?
Ooh, and Kristen's not here tonight. I'm trying to remember.
Okay.
If you let us look long enough, we'll get the appropriate tab open and we can tell you.
I'm sorry? Horace Mann? Okay. Thank you. All right. As a reminder, directors feel free to share parking lot items or.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So somewhat along the lines of that first topic, Digner, is the mental health work group. I haven't heard any updates on that recently, so I don't know if is there anything that you can update the board on in terms of that? No? Okay.
No, that group kind of came to a conclusion. We had some, some great outcomes of that work. I would say an overview on mental health resources or services is something we could definitely provide back to. It's probably been a while we touched on. Back to just share, again, kind of student pieces, staff pieces as an element, Director Finch. So while that work group is no longer in place, I think there was.
Okay.
Or did you say, sorry, excuse me, did you say kind of in conjunction with that first piece?
If you want, and if it's too much, then you could, do it another day.
We could probably talk about some elements and then we could even figure out a place to come back to it more thoroughly.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Going back to, going back to topic one, if there's any way that we can also include in there some discussion or how we are applying the policy 503. Students who make threats of violence or cause. I know it was a policy that was passed a month or two before I came to the board, but it was from state legislative. So I mean, it's the law, right? Yep. So any updates to that, and any way that we can include the comprehensive behavior plan, especially when we get to points 10, 11, primarily fighting assault, physical aggression, verbal aggression, and harassment. Not that all the other parts are not important, but these are probably the most timely parts of it.
Yes, certainly that'll be a portion of what we talk about. That was in my follow-up message to staff today after the community message yesterday, and so I appreciate that suggestion and idea, Director Lingo. I think that's, you know, a good connection point for the board, knowing that's one of our policies for the board, and then the school district. Yeah, so that works.
Anything else, directors? Hearing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, meeting adjourned. Everyone have a good night. Thank you.